Hello and welcome to today's video. Today continuing on with my Diamine series from August 2022. If you're not watching this in August 2022, go and look at my channel. I've got a bunch of Diamine reviews I'm doing this month. And today's review is this ink. This is Diamine Twilight. This is a really interesting ink. I think it sort of falls in vaguely into that blue-black category, but it leans this sort of grey-green, these like bluey sort of tones, but lots and lots of depth, particularly in the darker shading, as you can see here on this colouring card. We're going to look at it on some different kinds of paper, show some tests I did, and just give some general thoughts about it. Let's get going. So as per usual, I start with it here on standard 68 GSM Tomo River, the good old stuff that we know and love. Had it in a TWSBI Go Broad and extra fine as per usual. So let's talk about this. 5 points. First three are the standard ones. Firstly, it is made in Liverpool, England. Secondly, the company has been around since 1864 and they've got a great track record of making inks for fountain pens, and you know, they're good. And that's the point. Third point is that they're safe. So when you talk about safe fountain pen inks, one that always comes up is Waterman, and probably the second one that comes up is Diamine. The standard inks particularly are super safe for use in fountain pens, particularly obviously all modern fountain, well, most modern fountain pens, but also sort of like vintage pens and things. If you're using Diamine, particularly, as I said, the standard Diamine inks, you're going to be pretty safe. The fourth point, I put here, is that it's an interesting colour. As you can see, it's got these lovely blue, dark blue tones, bit of greeny grey happening. It's really interesting. And the fifth one is a personal one. I put it here, empty bottle. A few years ago on Instagram, there was this thing where like people were trying to finish bottle of ink in a year. And Diamine Twilight was my choice for that. I love blue black, so I wanted something that was a little bit interesting. And I gave it a fair whack, and I think by like November, I'd emptied the bottle. That was across like journaling and, you know, like writing out lyrics and all those kinds of things and everyday writing. I always had it inked up in at least one pen. And I got there in the end. It was a hard slog, and to be honest, by the end of the year, I was ready for something else. But I do think it's a wonderful ink. Let's talk about the performance here. I've set a medium to slow dry time, so after 20 seconds here with the swipe, after 2 it was very wet, after 20 it was still pretty wet. This ink is known for having a slightly longer dry time. I've set a fair performance on lower end paper, as is expected of Diamine. It's probably a little bit more feather and bleed than one would like, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I said it's got a mid-water resistance. As you can see from the water test here, it sort of moves around a lot, and there's a little bit of this sort of grey held behind, but there are bits where it's disappeared almost entirely, and bits that seem to be holding on a bit better. So it's got nice flow. It does feel nice out of the pen. It's perhaps slightly dry, but nothing too bad. So it's got great blue-grey tones with these tealy greens, and good saturation. As you can see in the darker shading, of course, it actually comes up quite dark. So extras, it's got fair shading, minimal sheen, and very minimal sheen, mainly only like in the swatch here. You can see like that hit of sheen across here where it's pooled, so it's like reddy gold coppery color. It's nice, but you don't get it in the writing. There's no shimmer, and as I said, mid-water resistance. So let's now talk about the performance on these kinds of paper. If we look at here up close on Tomo River, you see it looks really nice. The shading is pronounced. As I said, there's no sheen in the writing on this paper. And if we look over the back, nothing has come through. It performs well, as you would expect on Tomo River. And now if we go to the other end of the extreme, I have it here on student notepad paper. This is just a simple Spyrex student lecture pad. You can see there is some feathering happening there. It's not too bad. It sort of holds together okay in the drier and much finer, extra fine there. But in the broad, which tends to get a little bit wet, we do see a bit of feathering. And on the reverse, we see quite a bit of bleed happening. It's certainly not the worst. There are a lot of brands that do a lot worse. Diamine, you know, are always fairly decent, but this probably is a little bit more than I would like to see. Moving up now to copy paper, this is 80 GSM copy paper. We still see a fair amount of feather. If you look at these other Diamine inks I've recently reviewed, there's probably a little bit more feathering here from the Twilight than from the others, particularly like the blue-black holds a lot tighter. And if we look at the reverse of this page, once again, it's on par with, I suppose, with the other Diamines. Some performing a little bit better, but some of these sort of more saturated ones tend to sort of bleed a little bit more, and there's certainly a little bit more show. Lastly, here on Rhodia Beautiful shading in that swatch there. I love that. I love that lighter shading. I think it looks absolutely great. The lines all hold together. You can see it's fairly wet. In the water test here, which is where I've done the crosshatch, you can see it's disappeared almost entirely, just a very, very faint line. But it's done that same thing of, because what I do here is I put water on it and I just let it dry. And I don't dab it up. And so we get all the color around the edge, get the nice greens and blues, and the sort of pinky mauve sort of color held behind. But a lot of the detail is absolutely gone. The reverse of this page shows the same sort of thing. Nothing sort of too bad. A little bit heavy show through. It is a darker ink, but nothing sort of coming through, and that's good to see. Looking at this chromatography here, that pink is, that's a stain I got from something else. I'm sorry about that. Here's that mauvey sort of color we got left behind. It goes through the darker greens and then a light blue. And these are all the sorts of colors that infer what we actually have on the page when we write with this ink. It's interesting to see it though when it's sort of all spread out. But I actually really love this sort of purpley gray sort of color that's held down the bottom. We'll do the color comparison now. So I've got it there on the coloring card. I'm going to start with a stock standard Diamine blue black, the 1864 blue black, just so you can see sort of how green the tone is actually sort of coming through there. And then what I would normally do is I would normally show it alongside a Robert Oster ink. I couldn't work out what to do here, so I chose 3. So I'm going to start once again with a bluer option, and that is Great Southern Ocean, which is not technically a blue black either, but sort of once again puts it into the context of sort of that it is a greener, sort of green gray ink. Then I've chosen Grün Schwarz, whatever you want to say, which is much grayer, almost browny green. So we can see that this is bluer. And then I chose something that sits very nicely in the middle of all of those, which is the Pulp Addiction limited edition or special edition with Robert Oster Blue Addiction, which has some of these greeny tones, but still bluer and kind of in a way still greener. This has this lovely undertone of the grey, which is where the Twilight name I think really comes in. It's sort of like this night sky, dark blue-green, which is just so interesting. So what does this ink cost? Well, I've priced it, the Australian price, the US price, and the pound price of Great Britain. So 30 mil in Australia is $8.95 and the 80 mil is $19.95. The 30 mil I think is a really good option. I buy the 30 mil normally, and if I run that out, I will buy a 80 mil. It just shows me that I love the ink, and I have the 80 mil of Twilight. The US price is $7.50 for the 30 and $16.50 for the 80 mil. And then the pound price, this is from Colt Pens, which is where I buy most of my Diamine, is £2.45 for the 30 mil and £6.25 for the 80 mil. So incredible, incredible value. So I've given this ink 3.5 out of 5, which is sort of like where I consider my average score. 3.5 represents this is an ink that performs relatively well, is safe, all that kind of stuff. It has nothing special to lift it beyond that, and it doesn't do anything particularly bad to drop it below that. As I said, I really like the color. It's nice on the page, and it has fair performance. So it does everything it needs to do. If you get this ink, as long as you're not using super wet pens on lower end paper, I think you'll be okay. So this was Diamine Twilight. I hope you found this video interesting and useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notifications button if you want to stay up to date with the videos that I produce, and please feel free to get in touch using any of the platforms listed below. You can find me on Instagram or Twitter at @the_offstage_me, or you can contact me on any of my videos here or drop me an email, which is listed down below. If you've got products you think I should be looking at, or if there is a way you would like to support this channel by sponsoring a review or providing an item for review, I would love to hear from you. In the meantime, enjoy your inks, enjoy writing, and I'll talk to you soon.